My grandfather was not supposed to be there. He was 84 years old, his body fragile, his steps slow, his memory failing more every day. For weeks he hadn't slept properly. He no longer recognized his own home and at times didn't even remember who we were. But that morning something was different. He woke up restless, pacing back and forth in his room at the nursing home, murmuring disconnected words, until suddenly he said something with a clarity no one had heard in months. "I need to go to the zoo." My mother thought it was a delusion. She tried to change the subject, tried to calm him down, but he insisted. He grew agitated, raised his voice, went into a breakdown. He cried like a child. He said he had to go, that he couldn't wait, that it was important. He didn't explain why, he couldn't explain. But he kept repeating the same sentence as if it were the last thing tying him to reality. In the end, she gave in. She thought a walk might calm him. The zoo was crowded that day. It was the weekend, the sun high in the sky. Families strolling without hurry, children running back and forth, phones pointed at cages and signs. The noise was constant, a mix of laughter, voices, announcements, and the distant sounds of animals. While everyone walked distracted, my grandfather moved in a straight line, as if he knew exactly where he was going. He didn't look at exhibits, didn't read signs, wasn't interested in anything around him. He just walked. When he reached the lion enclosure, he stopped. He stood completely still. His face was serious, his eyes fixed inside. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. My mother called his name several times, but he didn't respond. He seemed absent, and at the same time strangely focused. Then everything happened too fast. He took a step forward, placed his hands on the fence, and began to climb. No one noticed in time. When someone tried to grab him, he was already too high. There were screams. Someone ran. Another tried to pull him by the shirt, but his hands slipped. His body fell into the enclosure with a heavy, dry impact, kicking up dust from the ground. The sound was so loud that the entire zoo seemed to fall silent at that exact moment. For a second there was no sound at all. No laughter, no conversations, no footsteps. Just the body of an old man lying on the ground, inside a space where no one was supposed to be. Then came the roar, deep, low. A sound unlike any other. The male lion slowly lifted his head. His massive body moved calmly, but every muscle was tense. His eyes locked onto the intruder lying on the ground. He stood up, began to walk, then to run. His paws struck the earth with force, each step echoing inside the chest of everyone watching. People screamed. Someone pulled out a phone. Another covered a child's eyes. Security guards ran toward the enclosure, radios crackling, voices overlapping. My grandfather tried to move on the ground, confused, pressing his hands into the dirt to sit up. He didn't seem to understand where he was. The lion charged straight toward him. The distance between them closed far too quickly. 2 meters, a little less. The attack seemed inevitable, and then the lion stopped. He stopped suddenly, as if he had run into something invisible. His body was still tense, his breathing heavy, his tail striking the ground. He stood there staring at the old man lying in front of him. The next roar came out lower, different. It was not an attack. There was something strange in that sound. My grandfather lifted his face, blinked slowly, looked at the animal before him, and, against all logic, he smiled. A small smile, fragile but real. He extended his trembling hand toward the lion. The entire zoo held its breath. The lion did not attack. He remained still in front of my grandfather's outstretched hand, breathing hard, his snout just inches from wrinkled skin. Time seemed distorted. A few seconds felt like entire minutes. My grandfather did not pull back, did not scream, did not try to protect himself. He simply kept his hand there as if that gesture were the most natural thing in the world. The lion stepped closer, sniffed, once, twice. His snout lightly touched the old man's open palm. A contact almost imperceptible, yet enough to make the crowd react with a collective gasp. And then something happened that no one expected. The animal slowly lowered his head and pressed his forehead against my grandfather's hand like a silent greeting. The guards froze where they stood. No one knew what to do. Pointing weapons felt wrong. Shooting felt unthinkable. My grandfather let out a short, quiet laugh, almost childlike. His eyes filled with tears without him noticing. He slowly ran his hand through the lion's mane carefully, as one touches something precious. The animal closed his eyes for a brief moment. His massive body relaxed slightly. There was no aggression. There was something difficult to explain. That was when the danger returned. On the other side of the enclosure, 3 lionesses watched the scene in silence. Unlike the male, they had not stopped. Their bodies were low, muscles tight, movements calculated. To them, the old man on the ground was still vulnerable prey. They began to move, one from each side, trying to surround him. My grandfather did not notice, but the lion did. He rose suddenly and placed himself between the lionesses and the old man. The roar that came from his throat was unlike anything before. It was not a threat, it was a command, a deep, firm sound, heavy with authority. The lionesses hesitated. One of them tried to take another step forward. The lion bared his teeth and surged his body ahead. They stopped. Silence fell over the place again. The guards, weapons raised, could not believe what they were seeing. A wild animal was clearly protecting a human. My grandfather was now sitting on the ground, leaning against the trunk of a tree inside the enclosure. The lion lay down beside him, his head resting on the old man's legs, like a watchful guardian. Minutes passed like that, long, heavy. No one dared to speak aloud. My grandfather murmured something softly, disconnected words no one could understand. He kept running his hand through the lion's mane, again and again, with the same calm. His eyes were distant, but serene. It was the first time in months that he seemed at peace. Finally, the guards managed to open the service gate of the enclosure. They did it slowly, with extreme caution. One of them called my grandfather by name, once, twice, 3 times. He took a moment to react, but little by little he began to stand, relying on his own trembling body. The lion stood as well. They walked together, step by step, the lion beside him, matching every movement. When they reached the gate, the animal stopped. He did not try to pass. He simply stayed there, watching. My grandfather turned his face toward him and ran his hand over his head one more time. The lion let out a low sound, almost like a long sigh. There was no resistance when the guards finally pulled the old man out. The gate closed. The lion remained on the other side of the bars, watching. He did not attack. He did not grow agitated. He simply observed until my grandfather was too far away to be seen. Only then did someone begin to understand that this had not been a stopped attack. It had been something else, something that did not fit protocols, instinct, or simple logic. While paramedics examined my grandfather and my mother cried without being able to speak, an older zoo employee ran toward the administration building, his face pale. He had found something in the archives. The employee entered the administration office nearly out of breath. His hands trembled as he held an old tablet, its screen filled with photos and reports archived years earlier. The zoo director looked at him without understanding, still trying to process what had just happened outside. No one in that room was prepared for what came next. In the records there was a photo of a lion cub, too small to survive on its own, ribs visible, one eye injured. The report described a rescue carried out years earlier from an illegal circus operating under poor conditions. The animal had been found dehydrated, malnourished, and on the brink of death. Veterinarians did not believe he would survive the first week. The name of the person responsible for the treatment appeared repeatedly in the documents. The same name, my grandfather. He had been the veterinarian assigned to care for the cub, not out of obligation but by choice. The reports spoke of nights spent in the veterinary wing, of bottle feedings, of constant care. The cub did not accept human contact at first, reacted with fear, but over time began to recognize a specific presence, the same person who fed him, who held him when the seizures came, who stayed when everyone else went home. For years that lion grew under intensive care. When he became too large for the space, he was transferred to another zoo. The bond was broken there, at least on paper. The final report stated that the animal had been successfully relocated. The case was closed. Life went on until 2 years ago. The lion had been transferred back, now an adult, dominant, the alpha of the group. Strong, respected. The same animal that had placed himself between the lionesses and the old man that morning. The name registered in the system was still the same one given when he was just a rescued cub. A simple name, chosen almost by chance, but repeated hundreds of times throughout those years of care. When my mother heard all of this, her legs gave out. She sat in the first chair she could find, hands covering her face, trying to hold back her tears. Suddenly the strange request from that morning made sense. The breakdown, the insistence, the urgency. Even with his memory fragmented, something had been triggered inside him. My grandfather was sitting in the ambulance, now calm. He looked at his own hands, as if trying to understand why they were covered in dirt. He didn't speak much. He simply breathed deeply, his eyes filled with tears. When they asked if he remembered what had happened, he didn't answer. But when someone mentioned the lion's name, he closed his eyes for a moment. A tear slowly ran down his face. No one needed to ask anything else. The zoo closed early that day. Employees walked in silence, as if any sound would be disrespectful. Visitors who had witnessed everything hugged each other. Some cried openly. Others just stared at the ground, trying to understand what they had seen. There were no videos being discussed, no laughter, just a collective weight that was hard to explain. Inside the enclosure, the lion lay in the same spot where my grandfather had been sitting. He did not move for hours, ignored food, ignored stimuli. He stayed there, staring toward the direction the old man had left. When the sun began to set, he only stood to change position but did not leave the place. When night fell and the zoo stood empty, a single roar echoed. Long, low. It was not aggressive, not territorial. It carried something none of the staff could explain. It was not hunger. Not anger. It was absence. My grandfather was taken back to the nursing home that night. He fell asleep early, slept peacefully. For the first time in a long while, he did not wake confused in the middle of the night. My mother stayed beside his bed, holding his hand, watching every breath. She did not know how much time she still had with him. She did not know what he would remember the next day, but she knew that something inside him had been closed. 3 weeks later, he passed away in his sleep, without pain, without agitation, like someone who had finally found rest. My mother was there when it happened. She cried, but there was peace. She said it felt as if he had been waiting for something before leaving. Months later, she returned to the zoo. She wanted to thank the staff. She wanted to see the place one more time. She asked to see the lion. The director hesitated, but agreed. When they approached the enclosure, my mother stopped at the bars and said my grandfather's name out loud. Just once. The lion lifted his head. For a brief moment, he remained still, staring in her direction. Then he released a low sound, a single, short, restrained roar, like a response, like delayed recognition. My mother left in silence. She did not need more proof. Some connections are not broken by time. Some memories do not live in the mind. They live in the bond. And that neither illness nor death can erase. After that day, nothing was ever quite the same. For those who were there, it was not just a strange accident or an unlikely scene. It was something that stayed, etched differently. Employees spoke in hushed voices. Guards avoided staring too long at the lion enclosure, not out of fear but out of respect. Everyone had witnessed something that cannot be learned in training, explained in reports, or forgotten with time. The lion changed after that. He remained strong, dominant, but quieter. He spent long periods lying in the same spot, watching the movement around him without hurry. He showed no aggression, but also no interest beyond what was necessary. To those who didn't know the story, he seemed like a calmer animal. To those who did, he seemed like someone who had fulfilled something important. My mother never took my grandfather to the zoo again. She didn't need to. She said that had been his final request, even though he never explained it, even though he had no words. Sometimes when she spoke about her father, She didn't mention the illness, the forgetting, or the difficult days. She spoke of that moment, of the smile, of the peace on his face, as if that encounter had put something back in order inside him. It took me time to understand the weight of that story. At first it felt like an improbable coincidence, a strange chance. But as time passed, it became clear that it wasn't just that. My grandfather spent years caring for an animal no one believed would survive. He didn't do it expecting recognition. He didn't do it thinking about the future. He did it because he believed it was right. And years later, when everything he had built in memory was falling apart, it was that very gesture that came back to find him. The lion remembered. And somehow my grandfather did too. Not in the way we understand memory. Not with dates, names, or clear images, but with something deeper, a silent recognition, a bond that needed no logic, a kind of memory that doesn't live in the brain, but somewhere else science has yet to explain. When I think about it, I don't think about cages, danger, or broken protocols. I think about the idea that nothing we do with care is ever completely lost, that acts of kindness leave marks that don't disappear just because time passes, or because someone forgets who they are. Some marks cross years, illnesses, fences, and even species. That day, a man forgotten by his own body was recognized by an animal he had saved when no one else cared, and that says far more about who we are than any rational explanation ever could. Perhaps compassion really is the oldest language there is. Perhaps it is understood where words can no longer reach. If this story made you think, you are already part of it. Because stories like this are not just meant to move us. They exist to remind us that what we do matters, even when no one is watching, even when it seems small, even when we believe it will be forgotten. Before you go, watch the next video, a different story, but with the same silent question. What remains when everything else is lost?